Welcome to Harlem Liberation School. We are a dynamic Black nationalist and Pan-Africanist organization headquartered in Harlem, dedicated to empowering Black people to, in the words of Brother Malcolm X, wake up, clean up, and stand up. Our mission is to equip you with the tools and knowledge needed to resist oppression and build thriving, independent communities. Here you'll find powerful Black political education, deep liberation theory, and historical insights that connect our past struggles to present-day solutions. Through many courses, engaging documentaries, and inspiring commentary, we provide actionable information designed to spark change. Join us for thought-provoking interviews with brilliant activists, educators, and institution builders as we unite to build a better future for Black people worldwide. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Peace and Black Power. Peace and Black Power families. Brother Agyei Tyehimba from Harlem Liberation School, where, as you know, we teach Black people to wake up, clean up, and stand up, following the advice and the words of Brother Malcolm X. Well, family, here we are. Here we are back in the saddle again. We got your boy as president reelected. He's causing great paranoia, some resentment, a little fear and confusion. And I think at times like this, our political education has to become even more focused to address the needs that we see in the community right before our eyes. So I'd like to take us through a presentation to talk about the importance of critical thinking in our fight for liberation. You know, it's an honor to be with you today, family, standing on the shoulders of our ancestors who fought and built and prayed and struggled and studied to push us closer to liberation. People they hadn't even met or seen yet. And that's, if you think about it, that's powerful. But if we're honest, we know we still have a lot of work to do. The fight for liberation isn't just about marching in the streets, protesting the police, or electing the next politician. It's about sharpening our minds and making strategic moves and learning from the past, from missteps. And that, my brothers and sisters, requires two words: critical thinking. Without it, we become blind followers instead of leaders, reactors instead of revolutionaries. So today, we're going to break this down. What is critical thinking? Why is it important? What happens when it's missing? And what are the essential components of critical thinking? Because I'm sure you've been to rallies and political events and meetings, and people say, we got to be critical thinkers, but nobody really broke it down. So we have to do that. And right now in these times, it's most important. So number one, what is critical thinking? Well, I could define it simply as it's the ability to analyze, question, and evaluate information before accepting it as truth or acting on it. This means that we don't just believe something because an authority figure said it, because it's trending online, or because it feels right. Instead, we investigate, ask questions, weigh evidence, and think through the consequences. So let me give an example. Something as basic as voting. Every 4 years, we hear the same message, if you don't vote, you don't count. Our ancestors died for this. A critical thinker will not just accept that at face value. Now, they may vote for their own reasons, but they're going to ask really important questions like, what policies are these candidates pushing? And to what degree do those policies help or hurt me and mine? Who funds their campaigns? And how does that impact their decisions? In other words, are they trustworthy? Has voting historically solved the problems we face? Or do we maybe need a multi-pronged approach? So even if I do vote, what are some other things I need to make sure I do as well? What methods have worked for us historically? You see the difference? Instead of just following the crowd or doing something because people are trying to pull at you emotionally, a critical thinker asks these type of questions, researches, and decides based on evidence and logic. So they'll go and find out how these people have voted on critical issues in the past. They'll find out who funds them. They'll find out what other politicians or initiatives they support right before they vote. Why is critical thinking important? Well, it protects us from manipulation. You know, we live in a world where corporations and politicians and media outlets and social media influencers who don't know what they're talking about, some of them, are constantly pushing a narrative, right? And many times these narratives are completely inaccurate, misinformed, or designed to control us, to make us uh, do a particular thing or buy a particular thing that may not be in our best interest, right? So without critical thinking, we fall for propaganda, misinformation, and emotional manipulation. So in other words, people will hearken to certain things, like Donald Trump hearkened to certain racist tropes amongst white people, immigration, xenophobia. He's hearkening to something that speaks to certain white people in the country. We call it dog whistling, right? He's sending out coded messages that they understand very clearly, appealing to emotional manipulation. But when you do that, you might be making a move based on emotion. That's not a good move because you're not thinking about it. Number two, oh, and I should say, when we do that, we spot the lies, we see behind the curtain. We're not fooled by propaganda. We're not bamboozled or run amok, as Brother Malcolm would say. And therefore, we're empowered to make informed choices. Number two, critical thinking. It empowers us to make better decisions. Think about it. Every day you make decisions that you may not even think about. Well, what are you going to eat? Who's going to cook it? Where are you going to work? Who are you going to follow online? What news agency are you going to see as credible? Are you going to listen to? Are you going to watch the news at all? What cause are you going to support? Are you going to support no cause? All of these are decisions, and a strong critical thinking mind helps us navigate these choices wisely, helps us to make choices that benefit us, right? Do we invest in a Black business, or do we keep feeding billion-dollar corporations that exploit us and say that we're not going to honor diversity, equity, and inclusion? How do we move? Do we join an organization with real community impact, or one that just makes us feel good, or one that's divisive and pits us against each other over differences in ideology, right, or spirituality? Critical thinking helps us move with purpose instead of reacting blindly and impulsively and doing things or supporting people or ideas that we later come to be upset about, right? Okay. Number three, having the ability to think critically strengthens our movements for liberation. That's why I'm centering this, is on this critical thinking thing. Is just not something you do in school for a good grade or to impress your teacher or your parents' family. This is for our movement to be free, to be empowered, to have better conditions, to be safe, to secure our families, right? To have sovereignty. The most effective Black liberation leaders, let's say people like Malcolm X, Ella Baker, Marcus Garvey, so many, they weren't just passionate. They didn't just love Black people. They were thinkers. And don't you let white folk or anyone fool you into thinking that when we have victories in this country on the macro or micro level, that's because we intimidated people, because we was brolic, because we was about it physically. We won our victories because we outthought them every time. Now, we may have had some bravado with it, don't get me wrong, but we outthought them, and that's how we beat them. If you look at all the different historical movements. What did these people have in common, these critical thinkers that we all revere? They analyzed history. They looked in that rearview mirror to see what was behind them, right? They studied their enemies and their allies. They were very clear on who's for us, who's against us. They were not confused about that. They built strategies based on facts, not just emotion, not just how they felt. Feelings and emotions are fleeting, right? If we want movements that last and have impact, that aren't just symbolic, you feel good, then after the protest and march, you go home and you're in the same condition, then we must develop disciplined, analytical minds. Three, what happens when critical thinking is non-existent, right? So I want you to think about why it's important, but what happens when it's not there in your organization? When you don't think critically, you become easy targets for oppression. And here's basically what happens. We follow instead of lead. We see this in people who blindly follow political parties, religious leaders, or internet influencers without questioning their agendas, without taking time to see, is this person somebody who's credible in the area they're presenting themselves to be credible in, right? So, like, obviously, when some of the people in this country were mad at Obama, and that's a whole separate discussion, was he good or bad president? We're not going to get into that. But them trying to question his credibility, well, he withstood that test. He was clearly intelligent. He was a constitutional lawyer. He understood law constitutionally. He was a teacher. He could communicate effectively. He was the head of the Harvard Review, so he was an excellent writer, right? And he had a certain charisma in terms of his personality. He knew how to talk to people, knew how to smooth things over. He's not the type you're going to bring it down and he's going to embarrass you and make the race look bad. No matter what you thought of his politics, the brother was always classy and elegant and smooth, even in the face of a lot of insulting and threats from others, right? Okay, so he's credible, right? So this is one of the things. When you think critically, you're going to look at those things. Not just he's black, not just he plays ball good and he got swag, because that don't mean anything when you fighting for, when you want food, clothing, shelter, and safety. All that means nothing. Beyond all that surface stuff, we saw that this guy has the ability to make rational decisions. He has the ability to be able to rise above his personal beliefs or inclinations and be able to see the big picture. And then he has the skill set to be able to put the pieces in place and move them and provide the guidance needed to make things happen, right? Because it's one thing to want stuff, and it's another thing to know how to get it and to make it happen. So he showed us all that. Now, regardless of what you think about his politics, you have to give the man that. And his wife, you have to give them that. They showed that they know how to represent and represent well, intelligently. They didn't get caught up in emotion. And even when you could tell there was emotion behind what they were saying was valid. It wasn't on some, they pulled it out the thin air and they could support what they said, right? So that's very important. Just because something is popular doesn't make it right. Just because a movement sounds radical and they told we're going to bring out the guns and that don't mean it's effective, family. And as a quick diversion on that point, while I will not name any names, there is a group that is currently going around naming themselves after a very important group in our history and telling people to text this number to join the revolution. They're going to have an armed movement. See, this is what I'm talking about. A critical thinker would say, now, what type of revolutionary organization that has a militia component and takes what they do seriously and takes our safety seriously would be on the internet with a number to text to join and would be openly saying that they're going to do some type of military action in this climate? Is that intelligent? Is that wise? Would you follow that type of leadership? Or does that sound more like a grandstander, one of the 6 types of people I talk about in the Black Liberation Movement? Somebody who wants attention, somebody who wants to make an impact, but they got no plan, no program, no legal defense fund, no thought of what happens if we do this, and shots are fired, and our people, what are we going to do, right? So if you're a critical thinker, you say, I think I'm going to see, how did the Panthers move? How did the Republican New Africa move? Were they putting that type of stuff in the public like that? Or was it clandestine, right? Could you come up and join it, or did they have to come to you? Or did someone have to vouch for you? And why did they do that? Critical thinking, it not only helps you not to become a cult member, but it protects you from joining people who are foolhardy. That's surely going to get you shot and locked up. And I have a sister who I shall not name, who complained to us, did a broadcast and told us about such an organization. Damn, they got her locked up, shot up, and everything. So we have to be critical thinkers. Luckily for her, she was one. And she moved when she saw certain red flags, she went left. She said, nah, that's not the type of action I want. It's foolhardy. The system we have to understand. Let me not say the system. Let me say the government to make it more real for people. It kind of thrives if it's adversarial, which this one is for Black people. It thrives on us reacting emotionally rather than strategically. Because when we're constantly angry or fearful, we're easy to control. You're easy to predict. You're easier to manipulate, right? Also, when we don't have critical thinking, we become divided and distracted easier. Without critical thinking, what are we doing here? Why are we doing it? What are things that we did in the past to people that didn't work well? How did our enemies come at us? What are the strategies and tactics they use? And therefore, right, should we allow ourselves to get up in petty arguments publicly? Should we be on social media going back and forth, rival groups, lashing out insults that involve violence? Probably not. Probably not a good idea, right? Critical thinking, because you should be thinking a person that's running an organization saying they working for Black people surely have studied some of our history, are familiar with some of our movements, and know that you never argue in public like that you hash that out in private. And then when you come out and, in the public, as Malcolm said, you have what we call a united front. You argue it out behind doors. You don't want everybody to know what your disagreements are, because then they could use those against you. Right now, without clear thinking, we can get really caught up in these petty arguments that divide us. Well, are we or are we not from Africa? And if we're not from Africa, we're indigenous. And if we're indigenous, does that mean we're anti-African? Can we not be indigenous and African? And can we not still work together? Or do we have to be separated on the basis of where we think we came from? Do we have to be separated on the basis of how we think about sexuality, how we think about women, how we class, age, family? The people we're fighting against disagree on many things. It is a myth that all white people agree. That is a myth. And we know that because we have public records that show what the so-called founding fathers, read the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers. They were arguing for a long time about what should be in the Constitution. Should there be a central government, or should the states have all the rights, right? They were arguing. They have whole books about it. So we know that's not the case, that they agree. But we also know that around the world, Europeans and those that support their world order and their thinking agree on certain key things, like we want the money and we don't want them to have it. We want the fertile arable land and we don't want them to have it. They have all this mineral wealth and natural resources. We want it and we don't want them to have it. Makes sense? They agree on those key things. And in critical times, they're able to put those kind of ideological disagreements to the side while they move to consolidate power. And then they'll probably come back and go back to arguing, right? And then they'll come back when they need to. That's how we have to be. But you're not going to be that way if you're not constantly thinking, right? Should I involve myself in anything divisive? Should I be in public calling out people's names and critiquing what they do? Not good. Now, for example, remember when folks were debating when Kaepernick took the knee during the national anthem and football games, and it was a big debate. Was that an appropriate action? Was that effective? Was that revolutionary? Meanwhile, and it was a big stir about that. Meanwhile, policies stripping our rights were being passed right under our noses. And this is what happens when we don't think critically. We focus on performative or symbolic resistance, which has its place. But sometimes when we're focusing left, we're missing out what's happening on the right. That's a lot more important for us to be responding to or dealing with, right? So That's one of the key things with the critical thinking. Now, you're now asking, okay, Agyei, I get it. I get it. I get it. I know what it is. I know what happens when we don't have it. I got some examples. Okay. What are the elements of critical thinking? What are the components so that we leave here and everybody is clear, at least from my perspective, right? Number one, you question everything. You don't accept anything at face value, right? And given our relationship with certain European forces, when they say the sky is blue, we should go outside and look. Don't just accept something because it's on the news, in a book, or spoken by a so-called respected leader. People have been known to be wrong. You know, a certain group of people once thought the world was flat, thought that if their boat went too far, it would fall off the side and go into a demon, like demons would eat their boat up and the people on it. And it was a time when people thought that the sun rotated around the earth. Yeah, so you can't just go on things because somebody said it. Even people you love and respect, they could be wrong too, right? Myself included, everybody. And then you should be asking, when I say question, you asking things like, well, who benefits from me believing this, from me buying this product, from me joining this movement, from me voting for this person? Who benefits? Amos Wilson has famously said, when you see someone, always say, who benefits if I move this way or think this way? Who benefits? Do you benefit? Do your people benefit? Or are you benefiting the very system that you should be fighting against? Number two, question everything. Number two, seek evidence, family. Where are the receipts? Who did the research? Don't just go off the social media posts, dig deeper, right? Dig deeper. See where people get the information from. Or, you know, every broadcast isn't a empirically rich and empirical data, but if the person doesn't leave references, just say, I'm just curious, where do you get that? Because there's many ways to get data information, right? You can get it from interviewing people, oral history. You can get it from reading books and reports, right? And studies. You can get it from watching documentaries, but you should be able to defend what it is you're advocating for people to do. I think that's fair, right? Particularly those in leadership. Also, once you look at it, say, what's the quality of that? So if we're talking about something like Black Liberation Movement, and you got a student that gives an essay and they write something that has to do with Black liberation, and they're quoting Donald Trump, is he a credible source? He did in fact say it. He did write it. But is he a credible source in Black liberation? Or Agyei says something about heart surgery. Is Agyei a doctor? Did he go to medical school? Does he know anything about? See, know what lanes people are in. That's not to say that you can't know a lot about different things. But when you know for sure this person doesn't know a damn thing about politics and government, he may be the president, but he don't know nothing about politics and government. Then that means that when he speaks on politics and government, or she speaks, you have to look at that with some degree of suspicion and skepticism. Okay. 3, analyze multiple perspectives. Be able to throw something in the air and let it break and look at the different parts. What if that isn't true? What if that's not the only reason? What if you reached the right conclusion, but the factors that you claim are the factors are not true? What if it's the conclusion is right, but the factors are wrong, right? Or what if both are wrong? What if you reached a completely inaccurate conclusion, right? Analyze multiple ways of looking at things. And the only way you can do that, family, is to do a little study, watch the news, read some articles, talk to people who are knowledgeable about it. We have to open our minds to that. Number 4, identify when people are trying to emotionally manipulate you. So in other words, they're not hitting you with actual facts, sound, logic, and rationale. They're appealing to your emotion. Does the information make you react emotionally without thinking it through? Does it appeal to prejudices? Does it appeal to hatred? Does it appeal to anecdotal information that may be true or not? Right? So that's important. And propaganda often does that. Now, many headlines that we read or even watch, let's say on a TikTok or YouTube, do appeal to emotion. And it's not to say because something appeals to your emotion that it is wrong. Say it has to do more than that, right? It has to do more than that. Case in point, and this is going to be controversial. I don't give a damn. We're past controversy, family. Some in our community have a real hatred for Black people who are gay, lesbian, trans, whatever. I really personally don't care what people do, as long as they're not hurting me and mine or setting Black people backward in a tangible way. But some of us, there was a period of time where there were people all over the internet and they were banging on on that particular subset of our community, banging on them. I'm like, well, okay. So what that's doing is speaking to people who have a deep fear, a deep hatred, a deep misunderstanding, right? Or ambivalence for that group. But beyond that, why should we feel that way about the group? Can you show that that group is responsible for miseducation? That group is responsible for sexual assault, molestation in our community? Can you say that that group is involved in any high-level criminal activity as a group? And if you did the empirical research, what you would find is that heterosexuals are more, are actually more implicated in all those things. But you allow people to emotionally pull you. And sometimes that means you got to stand on your square. That means you may have to stand by yourself, because the people around you may be getting all caught up. Oh, let's hate this group. And you're looking like, well, I don't know. I don't know if that's the group responsible for enslavement and colonization and imperialism and all that. Now, people help, but in terms of who's the architect, that takes critical thinking. It's very easy to have people have you hating on people, even white people. There's white people got nothing to do with white supremacy. So you going around, I'm gonna duff out white people. Okay, so you going around duffing out some poor white people from Appalachia, ain't got no teeth, they have no formal education, working in coal mines, suffering from diseases, and they are not your enemy, because some misguided Black person may have got you emotionally triggered on them. You got to be able to stand back and say, wait, are they responsible for what my pain and misery? And that's critical thinking, fam. Don't get caught up. People have you involved in all types of crazy stuff. 5, apply logical reasoning. Does this argument make sense? Do my studies show and prove what this person's saying? Does my lived experience, everything, you don't have to go to the book, you can say, well, let me think back on my lived experience. Does this jibe with what I've experienced and what my elders have taught me, or whatever, what I see with my own 2 eyes and ears? Right? Or am I being led by peer pressure or anything else? Follow the facts. Learn to come to decisions and to make moves that are data driven. This doesn't mean you got to be all up in the computer geeked out, but it means when you do something, do the math, as God Body would say. Do the math. Like, find out, like, what's really the problem. Are you making assumptions, or have you reached a logical conclusion? Right? Okay, so that's important, because you may go off on an assumption and it's completely wrong, and you wasted money, you wasted time, and you haven't solved the same problem you had. You still have, because you jumped to an assumption rather than thinking through, well, what could be the possible causes, or looking up, using the internet to do research or what have you. So this is very important. Logical reasoning. In another broadcast, I'm going to break down something that people familiar with rhetoric know, and law probably. Logical fallacies, things that we say, arguments that are completely false. So 7 out of 10 dentists say this is the best. Okay, that's called the bandstand logical fallacy, because a lot of people said it, or a lot of people in the field said it, doesn't mean it's right. You see? So there's all types of logical fallacies like that, right? And we have to be able to follow the facts, do research, even when it challenges our personal beliefs. Now, the last thing is, let's bring this home, family. Then I want to check out some of our comments. Matter of fact, let me stop right now at this point before I continue, see if we have anything people are saying to us. Well, first we got the beautiful, lovely Queen, Brenda Hilaire. She says, "Wukuzu to the family." And she also says, and I concur, we appreciate your attendance this evening. Please like and share this broadcast with your friends and family members. Please subscribe if you have not subscribed yet. It is more than worth your while to support this channel and this organization. Let's bring this home. How do we use critical thinking to empower ourselves in our liberation movements? First of all, understand education is an important part of liberation. So build reading groups, study historical movements, and educate ourselves beyond mainstream narratives. And here's a good one, family, that we can start using right now. Malcolm, he didn't name it, but Maulana Karenga studied Malcolm, and he called what Malcolm did oppositional logic. Malcolm had a way of starting with the presumption that if white corporations, the white racist government, and white Southern Dixiecrats, they call themselves, were backing a policy, we probably should be suspicious. If white people are calling for this particular move or this direction for black people who we know they hated and despise, we should not be mimicking what they're saying, right? We should be oppositional to them because we're in an adversarial relationship with them. So that's logical, right? Fact check before you share information, right? So I've seen this a million times. People spreading gossip, people spreading misinformation because somebody told them, it's juicy information, whatever it is, and we're spreading it, and it's false. So instead of somebody in that whole gossip circle saying, wait a minute, let me check and see if this is right and exact before I spread it, right? People don't do that, and it just becomes a snowball, avalanche into a big catastrophe of misinformation. That could really maybe hurt somebody, destroy someone's career, bring shame to their family, and it's not even true, right? So you don't spread misinformation. You verify sources before repeating slogans and statistics. Whenever somebody tells me, one of my first questions is, where'd you hear that from? That's a good practice. Where'd you get that from? Because that's what that speaks to, is all information is not credible and all people are not credible. And some people are credible, but not with respect to what you're talking about. So when I want to look up what's an executive order, the American Bar Association is very credible for that. They ain't credible for nothing to do with black liberation, though. So it's also knowing people's lanes and what they have demonstrated they are strong with. Particularly when we're talking about, I'm not talking about people, like individuals, but like institutions and organizations. That's very important. Also, think long-term, not just short-term. Protests are important, but what's the follow-up strategy? Are we creating self-sufficient institutions that will last beyond social media moments, right? Also, hold leaders and organizations accountable. By that, I mean, support those who have clear strategies and measurable outcomes. I put up a YouTube short on the channel today that talks about the pro and cons of cynics, right? And one of the things we say with the cynics is they don't believe nothing. They think the words they're finding fault. They don't support. They don't really believe. They're kind of always picking. But one good thing they do is show you, and they're being so critical of you, you might actually find out some things that are true, that you can change and all that, right? But we have to hold people accountable. Does this person who promised you this 18 years ago and was asking for all these things, have they produced that? If not, have they given a viable explanation why? Because things happen, family. I've planned things and it didn't work out the way I wanted. But you gotta tell people, this is why I wasn't able to do this. My bad. This is our contingency plan. You don't just go for years promising and I'm gonna do this and then you're asking for resources, right? Hold people accountable. I'm talking now more about leadership. The same goes for personal individuals. I'm talking about leaders in particular. Also, beware, particularly of leadership, of people who talk real big and real strong, but have no evidence of building nothing, solving nothing, changing nothing. Leadership, hold your organizations accountable. Hold these black politicians accountable. They running and they saying we're going to do A, B, and C for you. You need to hold the fire under their behind and make sure that they, in fact, are producing those things. And if they don't produce those things, that's the way by which you judge them. That's the way by which you evaluate. If they run again, are you going to vote for them again? They made 10 promises, they didn't produce one of them, and actually supported initiatives that went against you and your family and community. So you don't support them again, right? That's critical thinking. Let me tell you where we dropped the ball. People were also caught up with the Kamala and Trump and R.F. Kennedy Jr. don't know that he's a racist and a conservative. Yeah, they don't know that he wrote the foreword to this book. Oh God, I can't remember the conscience of America, written by oh my God, I can't remember this guy running for president back in the 60s. Staunch conservative and racist, and this guy wrote the foreword for that book. And people think because he's Robert F. Kennedy's son that he was somehow nah, man. You see, this is what I mean. Doing the research, not going on whose son he was, that means nothing. I could be the son. My father could have been the man. And I could be a son and be a complete creep, complete opposite of that. You can't go by lineage. You gotta go by what is this person doing, right? How is this person moving? How do they spend their money? How do they spend their time? What are their priorities? What is their character? For the most part, do they keep the word? Are they where they say they're going to be, doing what they say they're going to do? Are they producing? That's critical thinking. Now, people will try to make you feel like that's a bad thing. And the only people that should be making you feel like that's a bad thing are leaders that's trying, or someone trying to get over on you. Anybody that's living right and exact completely understands. No, you can check me, peep me, you hold me accountable fairly, of course, right? So that's important. Also, we have to teach the next generation, whether you call that Z or whoever that is. Our children and youth must be trained to think critically early so they don't grow up to become ruthless, unempathetic bullies or gullible followers, family, right? That they should be able to see the people that wrote this Project 2025. I know nothing about it. I haven't read it, let's say, but I know some of the writers of it. And I know that some of those writers were some of the advisors of Ronald Reagan. Right there, you should be able to make a good logical assumption that if they were supporters and advisors of Ronald Reagan, and I'm familiar with his politics, what he called trickle-down economics, keep giving money to the rich and it's going to trickle down to the poor. We know that didn't work. What happened was the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. And social services, money got taken from them. Community centers closed. Talent shows stopped. After school programs dried up. Public libraries were closing early. So if they advise that man and they're the writers for this president, we should be able to assume critically thinking. Chances are they're racist. And chances are they are pro-rich, pro-bureaucracy, anti the common man and woman, particularly the common black man and woman, right? Teach them how to think. People may find that offensive, but it's not. It's saying how to think critically, how to raise those critical questions. And you're going to notice people that think critically are in less trouble. They're going to keep more of their money. They're not going to be in a lot of drama. Why? Because they're thinking. You come with me here. The first thing they're going to go, where is this? Who else is going? Tell me about the place. Critical questions, right? So they get a sense of, they shoot out every party they have is a shootout. That's not the place I want to go, to be honest. So all of those things, critical thinking. Now let me conclude. This is a call to action. Family, we are being warred against. But this is not just a war of, let's say, guns or laws, policies, and practices. This is a war of the mind. And if we want to be free, we're going to have to train ourselves to think deeply. to think boldly, to raise the uncomfortable, maybe sometimes unpopular questions, and to move strategically, because ultimately we will win, but it ain't going to be through gunplay. It's going to be through we out thought and outmaneuvered our enemies, family. So I want to challenge you, before you accept anything as truth, pause and think about it. What are some other explanations? Maybe I should go learn more about that. What does my lived experience show me? Is my lived experience the only thing I should rely on? All of that. Before you follow the crowd, ask if the direction leads to power or retrograde motion, oppression, poverty. Before you buy something, ask, do I really need this? If I spend on this and something comes up, will I have excess money? Is this priority? All of this is critical thinking. Before you make a decision, ensure it aligns with our liberation, your families maybe moving forward, moving ahead, not just emotional. This is why a lot of our money is spent. If you analyze how the science of how corporations get people to buy, they stimulate us, and the word that's popular today is trigger us to make emotional decisions, right? So remember, critical thinking is a weapon, and guess what? It's free. It costs you nothing but a little time studying, a little time looking at certain news. And if you find you just looking at, let's say, NBC's news, you might want to say, you know what? And you find all that news is fires and who got stabbed and Pookie got shot and black people going to jail. You might want to say, are there other news channels that provide news about money, news about war, news about political decisions going on here domestically, locally in your city, and around the world that can help me better understand what's going on? Like, do you know what's going on in Burkina Faso with Brother Ibrahim Traore and how he's supporting black people in the United States and how he's telling Trump, you be careful with my people. Don't you go threatening them. We're here to fight. That he kicked out the French and stood up for Mali. See, you're not going to know that if you're only watching the corporate news, right? So this is all critical thinking. Let's use it wisely, family. And with that said, I'm going to end on peace and Black power, family. Please subscribe now, as my lovely queen to the right in our studio is asking. And we know that our channel tends to get low live viewers, but once it's recorded, tend to get a lot of views. So we're cool with that, family. But you know what? Spread the word, click the subscribe button, and be critical thinkers. With that said, peace, Black power. We will win. Ingrain that in your mind. You wake up, say your prayers, brush your teeth, be like, we will win. I believe in Black people. I don't care who our opponent is. Before you go to sleep and you say your prayers, whatever you do your yoga, stretching, have your tea, say, we will win. I believe with all my heart and mind, because you know what? What you say to yourself and what you believe repeatedly manifests, family. Okay? That's it. Peace and Black power, family. Thank you for tuning in. Please spread the word. And we have a powerful lineup for Black History Month we're going to get into in our next episode. Peace.